Welcome back to another edition of Uncle Andy Presents. This week, Uncle Andy presents sex! And as a special bonus, we're going to get to hear how he lost his virginity. What's grinding your gears this week, Uncle Andy?
Oh, I'm just reminiscing. Well, you know, the previous video about my Unitarian background set in motion some more thoughts about it and learning and understanding about it in ways that even I hadn't suspected. Now, you've known me for 20 some odd years, maybe even more. And, you know, one of my shticks was always how I lost my virginity. Do you remember the story?
Yeah, it was something about a piano at a church.
Something about a piano in a church. Okay, it was in the church and under the piano. A grand piano, really quite nice. They had a good music program at this church. They were very, very into music. And the scene is, of course, one of these teenager sleepover conferences in the church. And these are sanctioned by the minister, the parents, everybody. And we are encouraged and allowed to have sex. Of course, we've been watching sex education in Sunday school in the lead up to this. And so that's how it happened, with a gal named Debbie underneath the piano in the Unitarian church, you know, on a Saturday night, sleepover till Sunday, and then you got to hurry and clean up because they come in and use the same, main hall for the service. So, we got to get this is a more modern church at that time, to get the seating back in. It wasn't pews like my older church, because we had moved in the interim, and I won't mention the town. And, this got me to thinking, and, I've given mythology classes, and I've taught my students about the mystery religions and, the displacement of the mother goddess by the sky gods, and how this is, is infused in so many mythological stories. And, even the Greek pantheon is of 12, is 6 gods and 6 goddesses. So there's, this is the Hegelian, reconciliation of opposites, and, thesis and counter-thesis and resynthesis. And, I thought I knew all about it and thought it wasn't about me. But I think it is about me, now that I've spilled my guts last time. And what I understand from, these teachings in mythology and about these earth goddess cults and the triple goddess and whatnot, and many of these things you can look up yourselves. I'm not going to do it for you. The temple in these cults is kind of fused with the brothel, and you get an echo of this. Most people have heard of the Whore of Babylon, and they think, yeah, it's some nasty wench in Babylon. No? Well, it's a monstrous apparition in Revelations. And it's a woman astride a 7-headed monster, a dragon. And, presumably the 7 deadly sins. I mean, it all fits in. And Babylon gets the bad rap because it is sort of one of the maximum expressions of the mystery cults. But, it's kind of unfair because a lot of these cities all around the Mediterranean and modern day Turkey, practice these earth goddess cults, which included child sacrifice, which included sacrificing enemies, but it also included offerings in the temple. And the offerings, of course, are to go have sex with the priestess. That's the Whore of Babylon. The priestess is the emblem, the thing, that the vessel that needs to be fertilized. So these are fertility cults, and the sex act with the priestess or with other devotees. These could be other women willingly or obligated to go and have sex with someone. And you can read up on this. This is all Wikipedia stuff. It's not that unknown. And the idea is to go and spill the seed, spill the sperm, and through, presumably a kind of metonymic magic, the sex act, butterfly wing flutters the cosmic gears, and fertility is brought to the kingdom. And so when the sex act is ritualized, it can have this cosmic effect. So it can give you children at home, and it can give you the fertility of the land. Now, it's not, it's not completely far-fetched, because sex, of course, engenders more sex. That is, everyone knows what titillation is. That is, you get horny, you get excited, you get wanton. And what happens is presumably, no one's been there in a while, the ritualized sex, the man comes home in a certain frame of mind, right? And children are begotten. Children, both boys and girls, are the fruit of humanity, and of course, this expands the population. This is very, very important for empires in competition, rival empires, because you need soldiers, and you need more mothers to produce more soldiers, and you need all classes of people in a society that's beginning to differentiate labor and becoming more and more wealthy. So, the magic of the temple, the metonymic magic, kind of comes true. And who's to say that this ritual act isn't really driving more sexuality at home, more fertility at home, and that God works through this kind of titillation? That's, nowadays we would say biology works that way. But, I don't think the two views are particularly in conflict. And, this kind of snapped into focus for me, and I said, oh my God, what are we doing in this Unitarian Church? We're using the church, the temple, as the place to encourage our children to be sexual. And the thing is, the Babylonian view, or the mystery religion view, is that even though the sex act in the temple is divorced from reproduction, that is, presumably the priestess doesn't want to get knocked up by all these guys, or the devotees who are required to go and have sex in exchange for money, by the way. That is, you would throw a coin onto the lap of the girl you liked, and she would be obliged to take it and to consummate with you. Presumably, they don't want to get pregnant just from random people. Although, no doubt, if you do this enough, you're going to get some pregnancies out of it. But birth control was known back then, and even abortion was known, and there are all sorts of methods before the pill, before hormonal birth control, spermicides and whatnot. So there are vast records for this. Here we go. Do you want to say anything? Do you want to chime in, Johnny?
I think you're in a good flow. Let's keep going.
Okay. Well, but this is a case where you might presume that the sex act is divorced from fertility for practical reasons, but the underlying discourse and the cultural narrative is still go forth and multiply. And so the spilling of the seed is for this greater good of general fertility and of the power of the nation. The nation is the people. And you see this in the Old Testament. It's on one hand, it's saying, we got to put a stop to this. This is somehow not right, because the spilling of the seed is, the wasting of life and whatnot. You've heard these arguments. So you have the story of Onan, whose sin, it really has nothing to do with masturbation. That's a later misinterpretation of it. He refuses to impregnate his wife, who is the widow of his brother. And so he pulls out and spills on the ground. And that's the sin. And you can see there that the spilling the seed on the ground is not considered fertility. It's considered anti-fertility. And so we see an opposition to the old mystery religion conception of this, and saying, no, all these sex acts should potentially lead to reproduction. So this is what they're saying is no even metonymic separation of sex from reproduction. So that's the new interpretation of this, or the counter-interpretation, what separates the Judaism from the mystery religions. And they're saying, no, even in a magical act that's going to lead to greater fertility, no, you're just talking your way out of it. And Onan, of course, he's struck down by God. I can't remember what maybe it was a lightning bolt. I don't know. But he's punished. He's vanquished. It's a sin. And so this got me to thinking, it's pretty early on in, this sort of Christian, Judeo-Christian conception that sex and reproduction really do need to be closely tied and not separated by any, priestly discourse, because that's what the Babylonian temples are. And you can imagine that in Babylon too, human nature being what it is, there's money changes hands, and then sex occurs, and then no pregnancy occurs. So you can imagine that these really just become whorehouses. And the whole religious fertility justification really just becomes an excuse. And this is why it's depicted as monstrous. The whore of Babylon is this hideous woman astride a seven-headed monster. So this got me to thinking, we the Unitarian conception, forgive the pun, is non-conception. So again, sex separated from pregnancy, and they threw us into this, and I can only guess they're telling the girls, get on the pill. The mothers must have been at home making sure all the girls went on the pill, because the girl I had sex with, it was done entirely innocently, and it went all the way. There was no sin of Onan, I can tell you that. So
no contraceptive whatsoever that you know of?
Excuse me?
No contraceptive whatsoever that you know of? Or
nothing that I knew of.
Or you didn't know any better, or what?
I think I didn't know any better, and for all the sex education we had, it was really lust education. And a 13-year-old boy shown pornography, what he sees on the screen is what he sees, and then all the talk about, birth control, that's just like in the Peanuts cartoon where the parents talk, and it's just wah, 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 wah. You don't hear any of that. You're just thinking, wow, I got to get me some. This is why it's inappropriate for young people, because you don't know how to handle it, and you don't have an appropriate sounding board regarding sex with slightly older peers who will tell you, calm your jets, it ain't such a big deal, keep it in perspective. And so we, really in many ways it was worship of the female idol. But Nietzsche called it Dionysian as opposed to Apollonian. But I'm not going to argue with Nietzsche, but maybe he might have said Babylonian and been just as right. So this idea of separating sex from reproduction, of course, makes sex possible, and it elevates sex over, a greater societal issue, the of children. And the older among us will understand the pun. The younger go look at a dictionary. So I was not worried about children. And of course, the gal told me afterwards, you didn't even ask. And I go, well, it seems to me it's your damn problem. I didn't say that, but I may have, thought that. And like, well, sorry, I assumed, you're the one running the risk, so I'm assuming you're taking responsibility, right? But of course, the way society is set up, as a minor, I may have gotten away with it. But maybe had I, become of age at 18, they could have come back and say, okay, well, now the child support starts.
But you were both minors, no? Same age?
We were both minors, yeah. But then, but an easy gal who's does it meeting a guy in the morning and in the night is under the piano at the church, I'm pretty sure I would have argued, how do I know it's mine? Had she come back, had she gotten pregnant at some time and come back 2 years later and say, now you're old enough, now start paying child support, which is what our courts are doing now, by the way. So, of course, what a more likely scenario among Unitarians is you just abort. And you may harass the guy, well, cough up some of the money. Well, okay. That's how we take responsibility nowadays. Because of course,
how do you feel about the kind of double standard that kind of promotes?
Well,
Right.
the problem is, of course, it's monstrous. It's monstrous, and so there's the Whore of Babylon for you. This is monstrous that, first of all, you throw minor age children into this, and with all the consequences, and then just this vilification of the man, where you didn't even ask me, and it's just guilt tripping, after the act, and of course after that, I may have seen her once or twice, but we just didn't get along. I mean, it was all guilt tripping, and it was like being with a Jewish mother. And the connection of the Unitarian and sort of a Jewish sensibility goes pretty deep. It goes very, very deep. Because this is how men are manipulated, I would say, in both creeds. It's by women guilt-tripping men. And a lot of very soft men just going along with it. Now, they're wealthy, so they just go along with it in order to get some peace, in order to get them to shut up. And that's been the error. Now, I'm just going to finger over to my notes. One of the things I wanted to get through is that my deformation as a person, happened well before a lot of the events we see now. That is, the Unitarians were ahead of the curve in a lot of this zaniness. And one of the things that they were really down with was immediately giving, giving hormones to the daughters to keep them unpregnant, as if that were the only issue with sex, and completely ignoring, STDs. Back then we called it VD. And, and the rationale of this was that if men are having a lot of sex and enjoying all this yummy tumbling in the hay stacks, well, women get to too. And that's not equal. And this goes into the ethos of the Unitarians, which is the central ethos, is equality. because, I read before, they look to all religions. They're all equal. They all have something valuable. So we can't have any inequalities. And then they claim that this is a double standard, that men get to have all the fun, and women are repressed. Now, this is only because women are entirely empirical. They just see men having sex and women not having sex. That's wrong. And they're entirely narcissistic. That is, they can't see a bigger picture. They only see it about themselves. So women see that men who get sex are admired and women who get sex are scorned. That's not equal. So this must not stand. So this ignores the fact that it's difficult for men to get sex and it's easy for women. So if a man gets a lot of action, he's actually achieved something. While in the case of a woman, she's just kind of said, okay, she lays back, right? I'll do that. So doing easy shit doesn't get you praise in any other sphere of endeavor. So why should it with sex? So this is not misogyny. Misogyny is the genuine social construct. You're just saying that men hate women. And that's completely absurd. Most sexual mores were imposed by other women on women. So it can't be misogyny. Men love easy women. We're all down for it. So a fair-minded examination of the reality of the attitude of men towards women is going to show you that men serve women and make sure they're safe and well-fed and content. And so with regard to the pleasure of sex, the thought process goes like this. Men get to have lots of fun sex without scorn, so women should too. And of course, women never stop to wonder just with whom all these sexy bastards are having all this yummy sex with in the first place. Now, we should be aware that men, promiscuous men, do get scorned. But since they're men, they can work around it. That is, men are productive and find ways around it and spaces where the scorn doesn't affect them as much. The scorn is not as effective because we have other resources. We create abundance and surpluses. And the other thing is, it's simply not true that men are just having lots of yummy sex without consequence. The law books are filled with consequences regarding child support, and culturally, men were expected to marry any woman they might seduce. And shotgun marriages were and are a thing. Thirdly, men are not and never have had lots of yummy sex without consequence. A small subset of highly valued, lady killers were doing all the boinking with a subset of women, perhaps even a larger subset of boinkies than boinkers, who desire such men. The rest of us men were held, by and large, to the societal standards of one man and one woman. And so the standard is, of course, that you don't get any unless you put a ring on her finger. And we don't need to be Sherlock Holmes or Miss Marple to understand this, how this was carried out, how we made the great swath of men fulfill this societal expectation. The men were controlled. That's how you do it. That means repressed in whinies. And the way we're repressed is by not enjoying any access to eligible bachelorettes. And that bears repeating. Men's sexual nature was repressed by not having access, which is to say the control exercised over women, chaperones, curfews, and invigilation, served to control the men.
But Uncle, why, pray tell, don't we put the men under house arrest?
Okay, goodbye civilization. We could do that. You see, men do all the things. Men need to be out and about, to put it mildly. Well, we also might ask, why don't men just behave and not seduce us women? Okay, that's a drool bucket question, and I'm not even going to address that. What we have now, though, is both men and women are out and about, and propinquity ensues. The women are liberated, but so are the men. Like real estate, location, 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 it's all about access, access, access. So with the separation of sex from reproduction, what we're going to get is a lot of weirdness. And porn is always a good place to plumb the depths of such matters. But films, too, are a good way to look at it. And I'm reminded of this movie, Happiness. And I'm going to move off my notes now. From 1998, which is just really a tour de force in depravity. Now, depravity comes when sex is divorced from reproduction. That is, sex gets to run amok to wherever it might go without an object, without a finality. Remember, all it is libido. It's just pure energy. So it's gonna fire off in every direction. Now, in this film, it's upper middle class, intellectual. They all look like Unitarians to me. I think that's one of the reasons I was attracted to it. I could recognize the people. Maybe talking about it from the very end, the last lines of the movie, I identified with this boy. I guess he's about 13. He just walks in while the family is all gathered around the table, and they look at him, and he says, "Hey, everybody, I came." Now, from the film, he's been wanking the whole movie, and not with a lot of success, but it's just sort of his inner world. And he's, as a teenage boy, might be, instead of out playing baseball and trading baseball cards, he's at home wanking. When he might not otherwise be wanking, and if it weren't for the damn family he has. And they're all depraved. They're utterly depraved. They're all intelligentsia, by the way. A writer, a woman writer, a father who's a psychiatrist, also a pedophile, by the way. So, the connection of psychiatry, which, and psychology in general, and psychoanalysis, is that it allowed the sexualization of children, that is, it admitted it, that it's there naturally. And, yes, the potential is there and whatnot, but sort of the narratives they built up around that are just fantastical. It's pretty clear that if boys are left on their own without a lot of influences, you really won't wake up to sex and care about girls well into your teens. But if somebody comes along and nudges you, then you get, a premature kind of initiation. And that leads to a lot of trouble that psychiatrists should know about. So this movie has been called a comedy because it's just so excruciatingly, it's excruciating to watch. So, the father is arrested for pedophilia, and there's no doubt about it, he's guilty. And he has a heart-to-heart with his son, and the son asks him, are you gonna fuck me? And he says, no, with you, I'd only jerk off. So it's an utter destruction of the father-son relationship. Nausea-inducing deadpan. But you could see why the child thinks that coming is the end-all and be-all. Another of the stories is maybe the first incel in cinema. Really, this Philip Seymour Hoffman. I think he got pretty famous in this role, and he's just making dirty phone calls. It's a little cliche, and But the girl he's making it to, the woman, is the writer and intellectual, and she's totally into it. She's totally intrigued, and even agrees to meet him. And then, of course, he's disappointed because he's not good looking. He's overweight and kind of pudgy. And, well, you know the actor, and he can do those roles. But his other option is another girl who has murdered the doorman, purportedly because she was raped by him. But she also cuts his genitals off and keeps them in a freezer. So this is the binder. The guy. Go ahead.
I just said details.
Yeah. So, I viewed the movie as denunciation. That, yeah, this is what I'm growing up in. Now, my parents in no way were anyway like this. But I think people at the church were. I mean, just handing over kids to the counselor at the church and showing porn. But, I mean, this was all approved at the national level of the church. I mean, it's just outrageous. And the church did attract a lot of pervs. And my parents, I can remember my mom saying, they're too kooky over there. She was just being nice. She's saying they're pervs. That's what she's saying. And so, the film is kind of a perfect encapsulation of many things I lived through, which was, a hypersexualization of youth, a lack of an object of sexuality. I honestly was unburdened by the idea of, you might get her pregnant. And so, that sex education had the opposite effect that it was supposed to have. The old education was, don't knock her up. Don't get anyone pregnant. Keep it in your pants. And it's funny how feminism is kind of, with the Me Too, is kind of coming back to the reimposition of these values, although completely misunderstood. But you can hear the moralizing in it. Keep it in your pants. Stop, objectifying us as sex objects. All the while wanting to use their platinum credit card of objects of desire to get what they want. So in order for these moral values to be reinstituted, you would have to forbid abortion. You would have to discourage, maybe we're seeing some of this. I've run into people who say, I don't want to be taking hormones. Women saying, that could fuck you up. That might be associated with cancer because, these hormones might be involved with human growth triggers. And of course, that's what cancer is. It's unchecked growth of cells. And so maybe some of these things are beginning to filter back in. But you're not going to, you can't just impose it with keep it in your pants or else. Well, you can threaten to ruin the guy or put him in prison or financially ruin him. And the problem is a lot of these unwanted births are happening when the man is not financially capable of doing anything to help. He can barely look after himself. So we're creating a big societal problem of, vast numbers of fatherless babies, unwed mothers, the welfare single mother state. So, I mean, that's another jag. But any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at your notes and you have it swinging around to porn being a reflection of this kind of cultural development.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, that goes back to, if you separate the sex from its object, its biological object, or its sacred object, which is to reproduce, what you get is the fetishizing of just things surrounding sex, like ejaculation. Really is just a contraction of muscles to pump out the jizz. And but that's become fetishized into an astounding degree. They'll call it the money shot, and There's a whole genres of sex, bukkake porn, which is just multiplying the ejaculate as the end all and be all, like the little boy in the film, I Came. And so in porn, that's where you see that. And in this film, Happiness, the ironic title that the end all and be all of happiness is just to come. Now, like I say, when I saw it as denunciation. I think by that time I was mature enough not to be swallowing all this Unitarian bullshit.
Well, so, if we want to put a bow on this, you essentially took us through a historical journey from the times of Babylon to today about how the separation of sex from reproduction has had a negative impact on society and our culture. Do you want to kind of have a final thought in that that vein?
Well, right before I do that, I want to give you a little flavor of what the kind of stuff the adults around me would say, and the way they think. And I can do that by sharing just one, maybe 5 lines from a movie review of the movie Happiness. And, like I say, it's a tour de force of depravity and really child abuse. So this is a mainstream movie reviewer in the Washington Post. This is a contemporary review of the movie. Quote, okay, Sol Duns, who's the director. Okay, so Sol Lunst is neither shy nor subtle, but neither are his excesses gratuitous. The burlesque betrayal, longing, inadequacy, and rampant dysfunction that inform Happiness are so deftly handled that the grand guignol aspects of his shocking plot, involving not just sexual aberrancies, but murder, suicide, and theft, seem like everyday occurrences. And perhaps they are. End quote. Now, I take my word for it. I went through, 5 or 6 contemporary criticisms of the movie, all 5-star, 4-star critiques of the movie, and they all spoke like this. Perhaps this is all normal. Yeah, it's just, human depravity. Oh well. And this to me is Unitarianism, to a T. Okay, to wrap up, the thing about the Babylonians is that they didn't divorce the ritualizing of the sex from the finality of it, which is, you might say, it's the empire itself. What an empire is a nation, it's people. A nation comes from the conception of the idea of birth, the people being born there. So you need soldiers, you need mothers, you need workers, you need to expand. So even though they did ritualize sex and kind of turn their temples into brothels, they maintained the narrative, the fertility narrative. And what we have today, of course, is the anti-fertility narrative. That is, getting knocked up is about the worst thing you can do. And you've got to avoid it at all costs. And we have all the methods lined up to prevent it. And but I think, of course, there's a malaise, especially among the women, who want to reimpose the constraints, but but they want no constraints on themselves. You see how I talked about it before? The control of the men, we do need to be controlled. But that control was exercised by controlling access to women. But what women want the control to be, they want it somehow internalized in the men to turn us into like little harmless prudes, so that we're unable even to perform. And if you look at Happiness, the movie, I do recommend it, is the incel guy can't perform. So he's actually become what women want, because they want to take the moral load and throw it on men. But of course, that man is not attractive. So they don't want men like that. So you might reflect on why, immigration has been dropped as a policy in Europe, and they're flooding the place with, patriarchal, fighting-aged young men who will service the women who've already castrated their local men, their own men. Yeah, soft men are not attractive. So you can't make men internalize these values of sort of, modesty and even prudery. That is, don't get the girls pregnant, don't abuse the girls, don't touch the girls, get consent for every move you make, if you do that, you really don't have men. So the solution is you gotta lock up the women again. Well, look, this idea of locking them up is completely exaggerated. But young women, and everyone knows it, I practiced it even without this kind of reflection. Where are you going? What time are you going to be there? Are their parents going to be on the premises? Where's the party? With my own daughters, in order to keep an eye out for them. And understanding that they probably can't take care of themselves. And they probably do need a certain degree of care and invigilation. So women don't want to do that, though. They don't want that. They want to be able to, this isn't in my original talk, but you hear these cases of the backpacking women in Morocco, in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco or Algeria, wound up, raped and dead, because they thought that it's the men's duty to be restrained. And then they go out into the wild, and it's just not that way. But the wild is at our doorstep. The wild is anywhere in the world where the nature of men and women exist and are expected to coexist in the same spaces. We used to have separate spaces. And this was one of the reasons why. Not an unimportant reason, by the way. I think you got anything to add?
Okay. Well, thank you, Uncle Andy. I want to give a shout out to Debbie. Hopefully she's doing well and happy in life. At Uncle Andy Presents, everyone associated believes in free speech. We also believe Uncle Andy's opinions are his own, and do not represent Nephew Johnny or anyone else in the Andy family. We just love to give him a chance to let it all out so he can feel better about himself and have great memories of people like Debbie. Thanks for everything, Uncle Andy.
Good night.